Hey, it helps to press the right button. Sorry, folks, 3 minutes of complete science because I'm too dumb to hit the right button. Thanks for showing up. Glad you're still here. Hope you can hear me. If you can hear me and I sound okay, please let me know. If you can't hear me and I sound horrible, also please let me know. This is my backup microphone, and uh, I know it doesn't sound as good as the one I was using before, but uh, the one I was using before was seemed to be made out of tissue paper and broke at the slightest touch. So um, I hope I coming out all right. Would love to get some feedback on that issue. Wanted to talk about so, and then I just got it in my ear because I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. So anyway, as far as weather goes in gaming in general, I always use it. I was just playing Lord of the Rings Online, the MMO, which is fun, but it doesn't really um, weather isn't really a thing. I mean, if you go into the Misty Mountains, yes, it looks snowy and all that, but it doesn't really affect you in any other way. Um, Occasionally, it will rain in the server, and that's just for ambiance. And I don't know what the determination factor is as to why it's raining, but it only seems to occur in Bree anyway. Point is, it doesn't affect the game. And you should always have weather, in my opinion, because um, it just doesn't seem like an immersive world. And that was kind of why the discussion came up. I said, it's very nice. It's always sunny in Lotro, but it gets a little dull and it doesn't make things seem all that immersive or realistic. And realism isn't a bad thing. Realism helps with immersion. And weather is realistic on any world, no matter whether it's fantasy or not. So, uh, if it's breathable and it has an atmosphere, it's likely going to have some form of weather as well. So, figuring out how that affects your game shouldn't be terribly difficult. If it rains heavily and you're in a, uh, out in the forest or something, it's going to get muddy. Muddy's going to make you move slower. Things like that. Heavy rain makes it hard to see. It might have an effect on disease if you play with disease. You know, like your grandma or mom told you, put that coat on when you go outside or you'll catch your death of cold, right? So um, it really is a factor that is um, missing in a lot of games that I've seen. And it shouldn't be because it creates lots of interesting tension, friction, and choices for the player when it is used. It's terrible, not real difficult to implement. Um, 3 minutes into conversation, my meter says there's 5 people watching. Thanks for coming in. Again, if this doesn't sound intelligible or there's a lisp or any bad audio coming through my voice, please let me know and I'll try to adjust it um, so that it's not sounding poorly. But beyond that, anybody out there that's listening have any comments, questions about weather in games or world building? So when you're building a world and you want to come up with seasons or anything like that, it's not, I mean, you don't have to get terribly scientific about it. Um, if it's a fantasy world, um, similar to Earth in most respects, then, just using the 4 seasons should be sufficient. Um, the map you're looking at is part of a world that I made, and we reversed the poles. So this being the southern continent that you're seeing, instead of being warmer, it's colder. We just flipped the script on that to make it a little more different than Earth. But if you want to get into custom types of weather to make it more immersive or make it more fantasy, that shouldn't be terribly difficult. Um, it would be to how you're going to um, implement that would come into play after you describe what you're doing. I heard somebody talk about having things raise. What do they say? They wanted it to rain a crystalline rock. Now, um, obviously, that would hurt if it hit you. So that rain would have some sort of damage effect, I would think. And other than that, it would just, you'd have to come up with whatever conditions produce that kind of rain if it's not a constant in your world. But um, making something up and applying an effect shouldn't be terribly difficult. Um, but that's really all you need. What's happening? What does it look like? And what does it do, if anything, to the players and the environment around you? And as far as seasons, that's all a matter of how long you want the world to rotate. Um, if it's slow, maybe your summers and winters are longer or something to that effect. And if you want to get real fancy, like we did, uh, the particular continent and its position relative to the rest of the planet and the sun or whatever might determine its seasons and its climate and such. So, but it, I could probably pull up something as an example, a weather thing. But I think most people could look at something like the first edition AD&D and find weather tables in it, or Dungeoneering Guide, or wherever they're stowed. I'm so out of sorts, I can't even remember where you would find that stuff. It's been a real stressful time, so my memory is affected. But that's really all you need is um, some form of chart that exemplifies to people what is going on. So uh, again, anybody got any questions, comments, anecdotes, please come on in and say so. So I've got the chat open. I can see you. Let's see if I can find these. Where are the weather tables? I mean, it's really, I think a lot of times this stuff um, gets a reputation for being complicated when it really isn't. Uh, DMG has it. Okay, God, I really am lost in my brain. Excuse me. So again, anybody feel free. In fact, don't just please. If you hear me and it sounds good, please let me know. If it's got crackles, pops, hisses, or any other type of audio anomaly, be a buddy. Just say, hey man, fix that thing. Um, I can't tell on my own, so please let me know. But and if you got some sort of statement or question or want to contribute to the conversation, that would also be great. I hate doing TED Talks. I much rather have a conversation than stand at an imaginary podium and lecture. So, but we'll find the weather tables here. So you can see what they look like as soon as I find them. This is an impromptu thing. That's why I don't have a bunch of slides ready or anything like that. I thought I'm bored and I need to test this thing anyway. I saw some people talking about this, so I thought I'd just throw it on and go. So I'm always hoping that people will engage and talk, because otherwise it becomes awkward to just kind of sit here. Okay. See, other people have come up with something. Here's an example of on script here. Now I see how I can turn on share screen. Entire screen. There we go. All right. So we got that. So here you can see somebody's just come up with weather. Oh, great. And it fogs it all out. But anyway, well, this isn't very helpful. Got to pay up. I'll tell you what I use. I use Panzer Leader. Um, Panzer Leader is an old war game, and it had a weather determination add-on for it. And I just use that. I just modify that. So I keep the calendar at 12 months usually. Maybe I'll rename them so they don't sound too Earth-like, something like that. And you roll a die for what month you're in, and it'll give you, nice rain, heavy rain, snow, stuff like that. And if something isn't applicable because you're in a desert environment or something like that, just ignore it and roll again or go something, pick something different. But it gives you, is there I'll slow down and say it right. Is it raining? Is it snowing? And if so, how much? How much has already landed on the ground? How hard is it coming down? And then we'll get into wind. Is the wind blowing? What direction? How hard? Things like that. And then just some basic guidelines as to how that affects people. If you're walking north and there's a strong gale coming from the north, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to move. It'll be more difficult to see, especially if you're in something like knee-deep snow or something like that. It's really fairly self-explanatory. Just conceive of how the weather affected you if you were ever caught out in it, and then apply that to the rules of the game. So, but without it, it just seems like a stale and two-dimensional world. So, but coming up with in these days with AI, coming up with one is, you don't even have to borrow from old stuff like I do. Just go ask I know some people have rabid dislike of AI or whatever, but sorry. But you can go and ask the thing to come up with some sort of weather chart for your game, and it'll come up with something reasonable enough to use. So let's go into my world once I can turn off. Let's here, stop sharing. So, yikes, made a boo-boo. That wasn't what I was looking for. Sorry for the screaming. Okay, there we go. So if you see this, I don't know how well it comes up on my thing. Maybe I should share it another way. But on this background, the upper left portion of the map is desert. And the further south you go, the colder and more Arctic it gets. And as the world turns, we make adjustments for the summer part of the southern continent. It's never going to completely be devoid of ice and snow. It'll just be at the higher elevations, and the summer months in the cold area, the rivers will flow instead of freeze, and in the winter months they freeze and things like that. So that's the kind of applications that we use. Anybody got any commentary about it? It's really a lot more interesting if you have a conversation. Anybody got anything to say? It says there's 10 people watching. Maybe I should, but I don't. What else? One of the things that I know a lot of these people being the folks that created these games in the past in the 70s and 80s, like D&D used, is they went to play military sources. You can find reference manuals and field manuals from the U.S. Army. Uh, Now they're free repositories of PDFs um, that'll tell you, how much reduction in movement there is based on the terrain or based on the weather, approximately. And you can use that stuff as a baseline to create your own tables about the effects of weather in your game. So, um, but melding that all into the rest of the world, also very simple. Um, I like to have a world where everything is being considered. It's not just some playground where only the places that the party goes get rendered or turned on. Even if there's no party, I'm looking to see how the crops are doing. I'm taking in consideration the time that the average person in that area gets up, what they do, things like that. And seasons and weather randomly determined can affect how the crops grow. And if the crops are bad, that can affect the area as far as um, just being able to eat. Um, the economy might be agrarian, so it might suffer the economy. Hungry people that can't get food other ways tend to want to take it from others. It might spark wars of or border clashes or raids to try to get some food from somebody else if you really get bad crops and things like that. Um, the more detailed, the more immersive, in my opinion, the more interesting you can use these as tropes and things like that. Um, Rivers can swell if there's a monsoon that might affect how your party crosses them, or if your party can cross them. Um, if there's routes of travel and communication that go across those rivers and the bridges are washed out, or um, uh, there aren't any to begin with. Maybe the areas that people used to use to ford the river no longer are available because the heavy rain might swell the ford and make it um, uncrossable for the average person. So there's all sorts of things to consider when you use these details. And again, details shouldn't be a bad thing. They should be a tool to help further the story along, or as a tool to create a scenario or something like that. Um, I know that not everybody is playing D&D. I suppose there's people that play all sorts of different games and things like that. I'm using Advanced Dungeons and Dragons as kind of a foundational reference for this discussion, and I know that uh, I believe it's the DMG, they talk about dehydration and heat exhaustion. I don't know if they use those terms specifically, but um, subject yourself to an area that's very dry, maybe going through a drought, or just um, typically desert. You're supposed to talk about how that affects people's endurance and their ability to conduct combat because they're extra worn down. Um, I know that I got plenty of people. If the people listening to me right now are my followers, a lot of you are veterans. I know that for a fact. So you're all too aware of how uh, the conditions as far as climate affect just training, or lost in the woods, or, there could be some fairly oppressive humidity and high heat in the summer in Fort Leonard Wood and other places. Maybe you're out in the desert um, where they might not be, might be that kind of dry heat, but that doesn't keep it from uh, degrading your ability to operate to some degree when it starts pushing near or crossing double or triple digits, I should say. And for some people, 85 is way too high, So that's another thing to consider. It, where are these characters from? You know, I know a lot of people hate backstories to some degree, but if you have uh, place of birth or where these characters came from, if they came from a climate that is significantly different, that can, I mean, if you want to consider this sort of stuff, this is kind of in the weeds, even for me who likes detail, but just as an idea, hey, you know, um, if you come from a temperate climate and all of a sudden you find yourself in a desert where you've never been, you'll be even less acclimated, and it might affect you even harder than somebody who lived in that area for a considerable amount of time. So these are ways that it can be used as a tool and a trope, but implementing it in your world isn't difficult, really at all. So any comments, questions, anything like that before I go further? So I might just kind of go through some of the other things that I've been talking about today. I spend a lot of time on social media, um, an inordinate amount because I'm in a position where I have a lot of time to kill. So I've seen a couple other people talking about certain things. So, but um, let's give it a shot here. Let's find out who's actually here. I don't know how accurate this thing is, but I'm going to take a look on YouTube and see if it shows if there's any participants to the live. See, so what I don't, it's hard to talk if you don't know anybody's there, but it says nobody's there, but on the other, it says there's 13 people watching. So anyway, some of the other things I was talking about today. Um, one was there was somebody on one of the short form social media platforms that was boy uh, talking about ways to come up with narratives that explain leveling up, because in modern versions of AD&D and probably a lot of RPGs, you just get, you cross a milestone or get enough XP and boom, just like an MMO, you instantly go to the next level. And he didn't like that as a narrative because it was kind of a plot hole. Why is it that 5 minutes ago you couldn't, as a magic user, throw maybe like a fireball or cast lightning bolt, and now after pushing around some kobolds and you just happen to cross a milestone or get enough XP for the next level, and how do you describe that so it makes sense within the world that you're playing in the game? And older systems didn't have that problem because they explained it away, like with AD&D, you were supposed to go to a trainer um, to get that done. And that explained how you gained a bunch of skills that you didn't have previously. You were being taught. That XP was like a kind of currency that you took to some sort of instructor or mentor, and it converted into, here's all the new things you can do once you've um, satisfied all the criteria needed to elevate to the next level. So, and it's just one of those examples, in my opinion, of games that, or game design that strives so hard to minimize and overly simplify things that all of a sudden it becomes so vague it doesn't make much sense. And people that go, yeah, I hate those crunchy games, they get something that's so sparse in detail that they go, I got to add something in. And here was an example, somebody looking for a way to add that back in. Whereas had they just looked at the older rule sets, um, that conundrum doesn't exist because the attention to detail uh, took care of it. So I really recommend doing that. I'm not a fan of gold for XP, and I don't use it, but the idea of going to a trainer, that's a good idea. I do use that. I play a lot of Star Wars West End Games D6, or at least I used to. I'm always begging for players now, but um, that also had a system where you had some mentor or trainer to elevate your skill when you've got enough XP for it, and that really works out pretty well. So the gist of it in AD&D, and this is something that I think is forgotten with a lot of people that are talking about XP. Experience points are merely an indicator. It's just a metric. It's not an actual currency, and that's why I hate gold for XP, because it kind of takes something that isn't part of the world and makes your characters behave in a way where, hey, I got to get more XP. And the gold for XP is like, well, we're not really chasing XP, we're chasing gold. Yeah, but why are you chasing gold? If you're doing it for XP, it's still kind of metagamey, and it's not very immersive. Um, so in the AD&D, it says, goes on to say, it's an indicator of the character's progress towards greater proficiency in his or her chosen profession. And it says in very large, or all caps, I should say, upward progress is never automatic. They were trying to stress, don't do that. And they do that in a couple of places in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and it's meant for emphasis. It's meant, you really shouldn't break this rule. As much as AD&D, and lots of people go, well, the rules are malleable, and I don't want to do rules as written. And I'm not a huge fan of doing everything rules as written, but I think that when they're trying to really convey to you, don't change this, they do it in these all cap statements, and you probably should abide by it. The designer is trying to indicate to you, you really don't want to mess with this particular part. There's other, that's the way I see it, but one way or the other. So, and they go on to give an example. Just because Neil Nimblefinger's Rogue of the Thieves Guild has managed to acquire 1,200 experience points does not in large caps again, mean that she suddenly Nell, not Neil. Okay, now she makes more sense. She suddenly becomes Nell Nimblefinger's The Footpad, which is the title for the next one up. So, and they have a system for how much money it takes per level, or per week per level. So you have to sit in one particular spot for a period of weeks, in some cases, in order to finally get that. And I think that's where people who are all about instant gratification and don't like anything but this kind of slipshod, super speedy, they kind of go, oh, that's a drag. It's boring to have to sit around. But we never played with just one character back in the day when we used this stuff in the late 70s, early 80s. We played with at least three, at the very least, and we didn't we didn't have a maximum for the party, I should say. Most people go now, oh, any more than between 3 and 5 is too much to coordinate and all that. We never found that to be the case, and I played with some very hyperactive young kids. I wasn't exactly Mr. Attentive either, but yet we could still pull off playing with between 8 and 15 kids, and it made things different. When you have 24 characters, all of a sudden the whole complexion of what you can take on as far as an enemy changes. Obviously, their safety in numbers and such, and it also allowed for this system to work where, okay, my cleric is going to, off on some sabbatical to with his church or order or whatever it is. But I still have my fighter and my thief that can go off, and I can do adventures or side quests while we wait for that person to level back up or something like that. So made for interesting logistical decisions and strategy. Um, so, and again, it does say all training or study is recorded in game time. The period uh, must be uninterrupted. He or she cannot engage in adventuring, travel, magic research of any nature other than that of what's concerned with the level advancement or whatever it be. Um, so it was very restrictive, and I think that's why most people call it complex and throw it over their shoulder. Often that term just means I don't like it, or it makes the game too hard for me, and so I'm going to call it complicated and throw it away. But sometimes throwing this stuff away uh, actually adds complexity, because you have to come up with some sort of means of filling the hole that you've created by tearing it out of the system. But it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, the magazines that came with TSR products back in the day, Dungeon and Dragon magazines, respectively, they were filled with people who had come up with instead of just annihilating the rules, eviscerating them, just saying, "Oh, we're just going to line item view, so we're not going to do this section. We're not going to do that." They would take that section and they would modify it. They would find a that is too much for us to do, or something, or that doesn't make sense to us, or something. So we're going to change it with this rule. But at least what that mechanic was trying to cover is still being addressed, only in a means that appears to be um, easier, more streamlined, or just makes more sense to the group than what was in the rule book to begin with. So I think that's the big difference between then and now when it comes to that sort of thing. Homebrew rules are fewer and far between, um, and they don't. There's more of a tendency just to just rip whole pages practically out of a rule book, and you find yourself in situations like this where, well, it doesn't make sense to be in a world that's always sunny, or it doesn't make sense to be in a world where insert other illogical portions, because you've just destroyed the rules. So find a replacement as opposed to deleting something. Uh, Another one was somebody asked, do you want to know DC when you're in an encounter? Well, I don't play personally, and that's fine. You play whatever version. I'm not getting into version wars. I know what DC means. I understand that, but I don't play the versions that have it. But regardless of that, I don't want any terminology being used at the table. It breaks immersion. It it lends itself to metagaming. So, and in the case of DC, I could see a lot of people wanting to know that if they don't trust their DM. One thing I've noticed about playing online is there's a lot of people that go, "I doubt this guy knows what he's doing," or "I know more than he does. I should be running the game." But they don't want to run the game, they want to play. So what they do is they just kind of try to audit you, and they'll ask DC because they're trying to audit the DM. Are you making some encounter that I feel is unbalanced? Well, if the DC is of a number that indicates that, they can go, "You're not doing it right, or you're being unfair." But more than that, um, it's just immersion. Don't tell me any of the stats of your players, NPCs, or monsters. That breaks immersion. Always describe them in world terms. Uh, if you're a DM, don't don't give me the name of the monster unless I know the name, because I've somehow learn the name. If I have never learned the name, even if I've encountered that monster before, it should be left up to me, the player, to refer to it as I um, want to describe it, because I don't know its actual name. Um, and as far as physical description, make sure that's in world. Are we, if you're using weather, is it a foggy day? Well, then you're not going to see as much of that monster as you would if it was a clear day. So give a very vague description, indicating it's obscured by the fog or the darkness or the shadow or the rain, or it's maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's silhouetted against a bright sun or a large light source, so it's got a very stark outline. Give me approximate size, but not very accurate, not terribly inaccurate, but ballparking how much somebody weighs or something weighs isn't as easy as some think. So it should be very rough estimates, and describe that particular monster, even if it's one of thousands of goblins. If it's the only one we're looking at, describe that goblin the way it looks, not just going, well, it's a little mini humanoid with pointy ears and a bad dental plan or something like that. All goblins look like that. What does this goblin look like? Find something unique to describe. Just because it enhances immersion and makes the game a little bit more interesting and fun. So, but keep the stats out of your descriptions for sure. Oh, I see. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Ain't nobody watching me. There's nobody here. Okay. All right. That's cool. All right. Well, okay. Nobody's into this. Very well. I'm gonna. What should I do? Maybe I'll just play a game or something. It's too late to probably adjust the. I don't know if I can edit the title right. Who cares? Oh well. Give it a try. All right. Have a good night, folks.